and
Oddworld.
Hey oddballs, I'm your host Jensen, and welcome to episode 114. We are jumping right in today, and I'm going to say happy birthday to you September 4th babies. I'll be reading from the birthday book, so we're going to learn a little bit about you. Here we go.
Happy birthday.
Those born on this day may present something of an enigma to those who don't know them well. On the one hand, they are gifted problem solvers who are stimulated by challenge, be it physical or intellectual. Yet, on the other, are impatient when forced to deal with the petty details that form part of the routine of business practices. The answer to this apparent conundrum of character lies in their mercurial minds, which give them a relish for new experiences. Indeed, when frustrated by circumstances outside their control, these usually pragmatic and self-disciplined types are prone to explode in startling displays of temper. Generally, however, September 4th individuals are good-natured people who make cooperative, sometimes inspirational, team members with the provision that they are able to retain autonomy of thought and action. They are, moreover, rarely ambitious for personal glory, being instead motivated by the desire to realize more impersonal progressive aims. Because their skills usually assume more of an intellectual than a technical aspect, and in view of their innate urge to achieve tangible results through their own vigorous and focused efforts, these individuals are frequently best suited for acting as independent agents of change. Their talents and inclinations equip them for potential success in a wide variety of professions, but the freedom inherent in artistic and academic pursuits may prove especially attractive to September 4th individuals. They retain a similarly independent stance within their personal relationships, and, although they have deep affection for those closest to them, they are not interested in embroiling themselves in the minutiae of domestic life. Their virtues are quick-witted, energetic, perceptive. Their vices are unbalanced, isolated, obsessive. So again, happy birthday, you September 4th babies. And if this sounds like you or sounds like somebody that you know that has this birthday, let me know. And we're going to go ahead and move on to stories.
This comes from available_aspect on Reddit.
I'm convinced my house is haunted. Ever since my grandfather, who lived with us, became sick, and after his recent death, my mother and I have noticed a drastic increase in unexplainable things happening inside our house. I always tried to write it off, but this night, something happened that truly freaked me the hell out. For some context, we live in the province of Alberta, and our house was built in the 80s. To my mom's recollection, when she first bought the house 13 years ago, there was no reported deaths in the house or any history on the land it sits on. To bring everything back to the beginning of these events occurring, in December 2023, my grandfather injured himself going down the stairs and was hospitalized. In his absence is when we, and even my grandfather, who was in the hospital, realized something had changed inside our home. Only days after his hospitalization, both my mother and I repeatedly heard footsteps and movements downstairs in the basement. My grandfather's room is in the basement. Many times we chalked it up to just old house noises, wood creaking, the house settling, etc., until more physical things started happening. The downstairs bathroom sink would run, washer and dryer machines being open when they are previously closed, doors being open which were previously closed, items that were once on shelves being found on the ground, entire filing cabinets of papers spilled onto the ground, lights flickering and turning completely off when in a room. Once the stereo radio system we had downstairs randomly turned on and blasted the radio for a few seconds before turning off as I walked past. Those were all the things that happened inside of the house. What's even freakier, and what made the rest of the family worried, are two specific instances in my grandfather's hospital room. Once in front of my mother and aunt, and a second time with just my aunt in the room. The first time happened later in the day after dinner when my mom and aunt were there. My grandfather leaned into my mother's ear and whispered, "Who's that over there? Is that a nurse?" And pointed to the corner of the room. My mom was confused and told my aunt, and she too became confused because obviously no one else was in the room. They thought it was him just seeing things, because the nurses said he wasn't all up there after his fall. The second time was much more intense and left my aunt hysterically calling my mom over the phone late at night. She told my mom that my grandfather was starting to fall asleep when he jolted up with a horrified look on his face and quietly told my aunt that the devil himself was standing behind her. She freaked out and stood from her chair and turned and saw nothing. She calmed back down and sat back in our chair and tried to ease my grandfather. She said he never calmed down and then loudly yelled, He's trying to grab you. And my aunt said she felt something touch her shoulder along with a breath on the back of her neck. She quickly called my mom soon after in a panic, and my mom advised her to go home for the night. There were no incidents in the hospital after that. After that, there seemed to be less activity at our house until after he passed a few weeks ago. Since then, my mother and I continue to hear the odd sound, objects being misplaced, lights going on and off in the basement, until about an hour ago. My mom came into my room about 10 p.m. and randomly asked if I wanted ice cream. I said sure and went to the door to put my shoes on. My mom said that I didn't have to go if I didn't want to, so I chose to stay home. As she left, she told me to go lock the door behind her. As I went to the bathroom as she left, I got out of the bathroom and promptly locked the door. I also want to note out, screen door wasn't locked, but definitely was latched. After I closed the door, I went back to my room and sat and continued a game I was playing with my headphones on. After about 10 to 15 minutes of my mom being gone, I very clearly heard my mom's voice yelling my name to grab the ice cream. I get up and speed walk to the door yelling, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you get home. As I turn the corner to the front door, the door's slightly ajar, screen door wide open, and my mom and her car are nowhere to be seen. I was quite spooked because the sound of my mom's voice was so loud, I heard it over the floor fan and my headphones. I relocked the door and locked myself in my room until my mom got home with the ice cream. I told her what happened, and she also spooked, and we together searched the house in case someone actually got in, but nothing. I also forgot to mention that majority of the time, our two dogs in the house never barked at anything, except for a few times in the basement. I don't know how to end this post. The only upside is that we're moving soon, and hopefully this stuff won't keep happening in the new place we're moving into. Well, I was going to say that the stuff that was happening in this person's house was because their grandpa passed away, so maybe it's just their grandpa. But now I'm equally as confused as to why all of a sudden all this stuff is happening, but their grandpa was still alive. My only thought is maybe it's any of your past relatives or even friends, like your grandpa's friends, basically like guardian angels, I guess, coming down to, I don't know, prepare him for death. And they're just kind of making a lot of noise, like a bunch of spirits just making a lot of noise. But see, that doesn't feel right either. I definitely don't like the devil thing. That is terrifying. And I mean, none of this really feels like demonic. It just sounds like your typical haunting that is noisy and things get moved and you're like, what the actual hell? Like, why is this going on? But actually, why is this going on? And I'm still terrified about the devil thing. That is disgusting. The fact that this person's aunt felt a touch on her shoulder and a breath on her neck makes me want to throw up. Like, it's one thing for people in hospitals who have had some kind of brain injury or are just, have dementia or something to like have hallucinations, but to have that kind of hallucination and then also have somebody else kind of more or less almost confirm that hallucination. I'm not saying that it was the devil, but the fact that this person's aunt got touched and had a breath on their neck, obviously this person's grandpa saw something. And that's so scary. But I'm really stumped on this one. And also like really freaked out. I hate everything about that. If the story wouldn't have said the devil in there, I'd be a little less freaked out. It's still weird. Don't get me wrong. I really need some help on this one. So if you guys could go to my website, or I know for sure on Spotify you can comment, and I think on Podbean you can comment as well. Maybe on Apple. I'm not really sure exactly where you can comment other than those three places. So my website, Podbean, or Spotify for sure. Comment below on this episode and give your ideas, because I'm completely stumped on this one. But anyhow, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next story.
This comes from loose-offer-2680 on Reddit.
What was up with my old house? Just to be clear, nothing particularly big happened. I don't want to build anticipation, more just to ask about the random happenings there. My old house used to always kind of be off. The previous owners did die, but we have no clue if it was in the house. The house was apparently above an old mine, being in a UK mining town. The bathroom was unsettling. The original bathroom tiles had angels on them. They weren't designed to look creepy in any way, but they were unsettling. Once I heard my name being called, and the only other person in was my mom, and she was on the other side of the house. I kind of remember that if I left my door open while I was sleeping, I would usually face the wall due to some shadows out off in the hall. Being so young, I honestly can't remember if I ever saw proper shadow figures, or if it was more just my mind twisting the darkness into something not real. While the shadows weren't necessarily forming figures, they were darker than the spots, which is what makes me think it was something darker. No pun intended. Honestly, the house just had that bad feeling that no other house I've been in has. If you know what I mean, yeah, that kind of bad vibe. This place always just creeped me the fuck out, and I'm glad to have moved. Thanks to any responses. Two things that my mind went to was, first of all, if the house really is above an old mine. I don't know much about UK mining towns, but I do know that here in the US, a lot of people have died in the mines because it's just it's a really dangerous job. So I'm just going to assume the same for the UK. So with that said, I'm sure a lot of people died in the mine under your house. Well, I guess your old house, but and not to mention the previous owners died, but they don't know if it was in the house or not. Either way, it still could be the previous owners because some people really love their homes and they'll just stay there. Like, they'll just go back and visit and that's their space. That's their space. So that mixed with the mines, who freaking knows? Who knows who's wandering around that house? But see, then there's the creepy aspect to it too. And really that could go either way as far as the owners or the mines. Just because like maybe the owners are making it creepy going, this was my house. So if you could please leave, that would be great. But it could also just be, I don't know, the mines. If you really want to go like into it, it could be like, oh, the mines opened up some portal or something. I don't know. I'm really just talking out my butt now, but it's kind of another classic haunted house, but also not. Like, I don't know. When I say classic haunted house, I mean kind of like the previous story where there's noises and movement. However, that one was weird because it just kind of started out of nowhere. And then also this one's quote unquote classic because there are noises like the person being called, their name being called. I mean, that happened in the previous story too, except for it was much more dramatic. But either way, those are starting to feel like classic hauntings to me, and shadows too. I feel like those are all normal classic haunted home things, but it's just trying to figure out why it's happening and where it's coming from. At least with this one has a little more backstory as far as like being above an old mine maybe, and the previous owners dying, whether it be in the house or not. I don't know. I don't really like either story. I always feel bad for the people who live in these homes and things like this happen to them. Although, like, I'm not gonna lie, I eat this up. Like, I want to go to all these homes every time that I read them and investigate. So, that's just me. That's me being a little twisted in my brain, but it's okay. If you guys have any comments for this story, please let me know. A comment below. And if you have a story that's like either story or any paranormal story in general, head on over to my website, let me know. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And well, it's an odd world after all. Oddballs, thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to leave 5 stars or thumbs up on whatever podcast platform you listen on. If you have any comments for this episode, comment below. Or head over to Instagram and comment on this episode's preview. To submit a story or for more information, go to itsanoddworldafterall.com.